So here we have our top sleeve and undersleeve, and we're going to prepare these. We're going to be making the beginnings of a working cuff, but we're not going to leave the cuff open. We're going to make it to a theatrical method, which allows for easy alterations, but it will give you the premise of how to make a functional cuff. So a bit of a hybrid method, which we've adapted for the sakes of teaching this unit. So what we have here, the particularities of these sleeves, is that we have what's called a false forearm. That is to say that this seam here, forearm seam, is displaced further forward than 50-50, half and half. So the whole top sleeve is slightly bigger than the undersleeve by 1 inch all the way down. This means that this seam is displaced further inside the arm. Now that means that the shape here is it's slightly in the wrong location, and we need to bring it further inwards. The way by which we do that is by including length in this section, which is why if you apply your top sleeve to your undersleeve, you'll see that the notches for the top sleeve are about 1/4 inch smaller than the notches for the undersleeve. So what we need to do is go to the iron and stretch this section out so that it matches the length on this. Once we've done that, we can sew these together and begin prepping the bottom of our cuff. So I've positioned my top sleeve on top of my undersleeve, and I'm bringing this further forward and then just stretching the forearm in between both notches. A little bit of steam goes a long way, and I'm stretching just this section. And as you can see, I've now included length by creating these little waves. I'm now going to check that that length is correct, and as you can see, my notches are now matching up. So I can now pin this in place, go to the machine, and sew down this edge 3/8 of an inch in, and press it open. So I've now pressed my forearm seam open, and I'm going to create a silicia stay in the cuff so that when we turn it over, the inlay is being hemmed against a silicia which is laying inside of the sleeve and isn't creating any marks on the cuff of the top block. The way we're going to do this is we're going to measure from the base of the sleeve down to the inlay, and we're going to apply that measure plus 1 inch and draw a straight line connecting that point, like so. We're then going to place a layer of silicia in that section, covering the entirety of that line. We're going to pin it in place, and we're going to flip it. And we're then going to cut around it. We'll then stagger this edge by about 1/2 inch. And then base this stay in place. making sure that we eliminate all the length and that we make snips to allow any discrepancies. Ensure that everything is laying nice and flat. And there's no pulling or tugging. Through this middle section here, we're going to turn around and we're going to pop a baste inside of the seam from the height at which we've started padding the silicia stay. Again, making sure that there are no tightnesses in that stay, ever so slightly pulling the top cloth. Then, with our basting cotton, we're going to come in and we're going to run a light baste that is only going to catch the seam allowance. And I can feel it's only catching the seam allowance because I'm flicking the needle out of the top cloth. I'm then going to lay this nice and flat. Running another base at the bottom and then along the side going out. So, and the same on the other side. I'm then going to go to the machine and I'm going to stretch the stay to make sure that it's not interfering with the top cloth. I'm going to give it a pull this way, and I'm going to give it a pull that way. I'll now reverse it and make sure that everything's laying nice and flat. So the next step is for me to mark across to the wrong side, where our silicia stays are in place, the lines that we're going to be sewing up in order to encase the edges of the working cuts. I'm going to lay my ruler 3/8 of an inch in from the marked stitch line, and I'm going to draw to the other side that mark. I'll do the same on this side, except I'll do it 3/8 of an inch in from the raw edge. I've now got my two lines, which will allow me to stitch them up and then invert them to get my working cuff. So what I need to do now is to determine where I need to fold this over. I'll do the same by marking the bottom of the cuff in place. Like so. And in order to make sure that I don't get any length occurring in the section where there is a considerable inlay, I'm going to pick up this angle to the same angle at which it is coming against this line. Like so. My next step is to fold this over and make sure that I'm basting them in place line on line. So, kicking that a little bit over, just basting that edge down, and doing the same on the opposite end. This time just on the edge of the inlay. Again, same on the side, lining up raw edge to raw edge, just to make things easier to sew in place. So, we're now going to sew down our lines, laying cuffs flat and sewing them on the line that we've drawn, not on the inlay side, but on the top cloth side. Now that that's sewn in place, I'll snip my threads. So, my stitch lines come from the base all the way up to the top of the stay, and then stop. Same here. From the base fold all the way up to the top of the stay, where the top cloth is, not where the inlay is. We now need to invert this. We'll release our bastes that are holding in place our hem, not the ones that are holding in place the silicia stay. flip this over. You can pry out the edges with the needle, or with a point tool. Making sure that the points are nice and square and flat. Like so. And now that that is in place, we're going to base down the bottom of our cuff and then the top of the inlay. Make sure that your points are nice and sharp. Right, so here we're basting along our mark stitch. Tack on. And then again at the top of our inlay. Make sure that your seam is displaced to the inside so that the raw edge of the top of the inlay is not visible from the outside. And you'll find that there's a little bit of length included in this inlay, and that's good. We need that to prevent it from interfering with the cloth that sits on top. That length is achieved through the kick that we've cut into the inlay. Again, I'm just displacing that seam inwards and distributing the excess length that's occurring into the silicia state. Tucking that down, then again making sure that that seam is rolled out and in. And we're now going to press all of this flat and shrink in some of that length. Here we are, keeping the seam nicely rolled out. Again, don't press the top section yet, leave that free. We're just pressing all of this nice and flush and shrinking in the top of that inlay. Again, rolling the seam inwards, not pressing further up, and shrinking in the top of that inlay. Dry that out nicely. Turn it over. Make sure that it's all sitting nice and flush and that you can't see the extremities of those edges. Again, stretching any tightness that's occurring. We're now going to hem stitch this inlay in place. You can cross stitch or hem stitch or pad it down, whichever you prefer. And all you're doing is catching the top cloth and the silicea stay that's beneath. Sorry, you're catching the inlay and the silicea stay that's beneath, but not the top cloth. So I am doing that by pushing my needle all the way through and then flicking it out of the top cloth. You would normally use a black thread to do this in, or rather the same colour thread as your top cloth. In this instance, so that you can see it, I'm using white. Our next step is to close the hind arm. And for this, we flip the undersleeve right side up and the top sleeve on top of it. We lay the raw edge into our mark stitch, matching up our notch, and secure it down with either a baste or pins. make sure that the bottom of the cuff is lining up perfectly. As we get into the bottom section here, we're going to mark a line 3/8 in from our cuff, like so. We're then going to mark a notch a 1/2 inch down from where our inlay for the vent is placed, and we're going to baste this down. So I'm just going to flip that in, and run a baste to help me secure it for when I'm machining it. Now that baste is going to delicately head just past the new notch that I've formed. It's going to be a little bit tricky to do. Just apply a little bit of dexterity and care to where you position those bastes. And make sure you secure them nicely in place. We're now going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch from that new notch, which sits, as I said, a 1/2 inch below where our vent starts, all the way up our hind arm. Our last step before pressing that seam is to undo these tacks snip our excess threads, and with a whip stitch secure down our cuff along that line that we just drew. Making sure again that the bottoms of each side of the cuff are lining up perfectly. Tack that in nicely. I'm now going to press this open. I've now laid my sleeve on my sleeve board. I'm going to get the shape out by using just the tip of the board, and I'm going to press the seam open. Again, there's a curve on the seam, so you're pressing it in sections along the tip of the board. Now, stop pressing it as you get to your notch where you produced a tack. And then, at this point, we're going to trim the inlay ever so slightly and give it some snips and a stretch. So your aim here is for you to get the inlay to curve back like so, so that it lays flush. Now you can see that there's a tightness here, which is going to cause a disturbance. So what we're going to do is snip into here, release some of this, and create some snips. We're also going to stretch this by laying it flat on the board and pulling. Please ensure that you're only stretching your inlay and not the cloth of the sleeve itself. Now that we've done that, we should be able to lay it back on the sleeve board and curve that nicely in place. And what we want is a gradual curve, soft, from that tip there up to our notch, ensuring that it lays nice and flat into that point. Flatten it like so, lay your iron on, and let that just gradually sit in place. And as you can see, we've now got our inlay slowly folding over, and if we've done our job correctly, if we invert the sleeve, our seam is pressed open nice and flushly, and we cannot see that inversion. I now turn the cuff inside out and grab my inlay for the undercuff, and I'm going to just secure that in place at the very top, like so, making sure that I'm pulling it ever so slightly up so that this underside is not shown through once the cuff is inverted. Like so. You can see that there, I've just pulled that ever so slightly up. And that's your sleeve made up, and now all you need to do is line it. Here we have your prepped sleeve in the top cloth and your sleeve lining, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold this lining back 3 inches along the cuff on the sleeve board with the iron, and then insert it into the cuff and let it head up and place some tacks in place so that when we put the sleeve in, everything's ready to go. So here we have the sleeve cuff turned back on the lining by 3 inches. So what we're going 3 inches being the amount of inlay that we left in. So what we're going to do is grab a sleeve board, turn the top cloth inside out, we're then going to turn the sleeve lining right side out and line up forearm with forearm, and we're going to baste this down to the cuff an inch down from the folded edge. Ensure that your lining isn't tight. If you're finding that it's getting tight, you can simply quickly undo the hind arm seam and splay that a little bit. So I'm basting from one side to the next, and releasing any tightness that occurs. There's a little bit of tightness there, so I'm simply going to knit this seam. Works better if you have an unpicker rather than a large pair of scissors. That's now released, and I can continue basting that down, ensuring that everything is nice and flat. And the lining won't be causing disturbances on the other side. You can take this cut up a fair few inches and then baste it back down. Take that in place. And then baste the lining back down along this split that we created. so. Next step is you reverse the sleeve back with the lining contained in. Go this way. Ensure that your lining is not twisted inside. And make sure that you can pop your arm in and all the way through. Then give the lining a good tug, flatten the sleeve, thread a needle, and create 2 little tacks that will ensure that the lining is well placed once we attach it to the coat. Now you can see I've got my couple inches excess there, laying that nice and flat, making sure everything's nice and neat. I then come to this point here in the crown, a couple inches down from the height. I gently put my hand in and I shift the lining down about a ½ inch and I create a tack. This creates a little bit of excess length within the lining and prevents it from disturbing the drapery of the sleeve once it's attached in the coat. That's one tack done. I then do exactly the same thing in the undersleeve, coming a couple inches down from where it will get sewn, about here, laying my hand in, making sure that everything's laying flat, and then shifting the lining down about a ½ inch. And so, and that is your sleeve lined.